and then we will kind of transition to your guys' sort of practical exercise. It's obviously difficult to do these sorts of things over the internet and WebEx and stuff like that when you guys can't directly collaborate. So we're gonna do our best. The goal of the kind of practical portion of this is you guys just kind of talk through the steps for how we would execute a platoon mission. So you'll be provided a kind of a sit temp as far as the enemy, your terrain and all that, and your mission, and then we'll sort of talk through the process of how we actually go about doing this stuff. So if you feel very comfortable with how you would do these things, then maybe let someone else kind of contribute more. The goal is that we kind of reach a level understanding of how we do these things. So the first question then, just as a recap, we're going to briefly talk about some concepts or terms, a refresher from last week, or if you weren't here last week, some of this will be new to you. So characteristics of the offense. Figure out how to do full screen on this thing. All this stuff. All right, so characteristics of the offense. You may recall there are 4 of them. The first one being audacity. How would you define audacity again? It's just to anybody.
Just being aggressive and like audacious with your movements and your actions.
Just define a word with the word. I think you're correct though. So again, the Army says audacity is just a simple plan, boldly executed. So audacity just kind of means, as you said, kind of an aggressive execution of your concept. Second characteristic of the offense is concentration. Somebody else, how would you define concentration in this context?
I have in my notes as when to mass the people and when to disperse them, depending on what the enemy maneuvers.
Yeah, concentration is just so there's actually a distinction really quick. When we look at characteristics of the defense, one of the characteristics is mass and concentration. On the offense, it's concentration. The distinction being in the offense, like we talked about last week, concentration is how you concentrate people and when you concentrate them. And that can also mean dispersing people or spreading them out. So there's going to be times when it's appropriate to bring all your people in together to concentrate their effects as part of your maneuver plan. It's also appropriate times to spread people out. So keep in mind, concentration doesn't mean like necessarily clumping everybody together. It can also mean spreading them out. Your third one is surprise. What is surprise as far as offensive operations are concerned? How do we define
Yeah, surprise is basically just conducting your operation without the enemy knowing.
that? Comes back to the idea of or concept of initiative, right? When we talk about gaining or maintaining the initiative in offensive operations, the initiative really, it just means that you get to dictate when and where you fight. And so surprise as a characteristic of the offense is kind of just being able to seize or maintain initiative by choosing when you fight, where you fight, how you fight. Try to stack everything as heavily in your favor. And then the last one is tempo. Anybody kind of define tempo here?
It's providing a speed that the enemy can't match or they can't keep up with. So it's just controlling the being on the offensive or capturing the offensive so that you can.
Yeah, your mic's coming in pretty quiet to me. I don't know, it might be my computer, but I think I got what you're saying. Tempo, right, is just kind of controlling the pace of the fight. So on the offense, we're usually trying to establish a high tempo or a rapid tempo, and that means that the enemy can't match the speed that we're conducting our operations. They're not able to effectively respond to what's going on. So you might say that tempo in the offense oftentimes seeks to overwhelm your opponent by, again, setting a speed or a pace of your operation that they can't match. There are times when it's appropriate to kind of slow the tempo down. You've heard the term like tactical pause and things like that to let a situation develop, which is to kind of mean, take a little bit of time, see what's going on, see what the enemy is doing, see where your people are at, and then maybe reevaluate or adjust your plan. So those are 4 characteristics of the offense. So we've been through all this. Hopefully you guys are familiar with this stuff. We stopped right here. Leadership on patrol last week. Remember, just to restate this, and I'm going to kind of highlight this in the next portion of this, but as a leader, especially a patrol leader, you can put yourself wherever you feel you need to be in the patrol. I know you read like 3-21.8 of the Ranger Handbook always talks about the leader, especially the platoon leader, you being at like the point of most friction in an operation or on a patrol. Yes, that's true, but like how you define that is difficult. It doesn't always mean you have to be with the assault element. You put yourself wherever you think you need to be to most effectively control the overall operation. So there are plenty of times I can think of when you don't need to be with the assault element. You might be better served being somewhere else. So now we'll talk about historic examples. So I'm going to take a couple minutes. I'm going to talk you guys through this. As we're going through, I'm going to kind of highlight some of the concepts we talked about previously and how they pertain to this. Again, this happened, you can see, it's Operation Ivory Coast, right? It's in Vietnam, November 21st, 1970. So here's a quick backstory on that. So in May of 1970, we were flying like SR-71s, the Blackbirds, those kind of stealth aircraft. They got a camera, flying those things over North Vietnam. And the National Reconnaissance Office, one of the big things that they were tasked with more than anything else was to try to identify POW camps in North Vietnam. So 1970, they're flying these SR-71s, these unmanned drones, which we had as far back as you can see like the 60s. They're flying these unmanned drones over different parts of North Vietnam, and they discover what they think is like a POW camp near Son Tay, which is, you can see it's about 30 miles west of Hanoi, which was the capital of North Vietnam before it just became Vietnam. So the compound, they'd identified this as early as kind of middle of 1968, but its proximity to like Hanoi and things around it that we'll talk about here shortly made it extremely hard to figure out, like, how do we deal with this problem of, we think there's a POW camp here, but what can we do about it? We knew at this point that there were over 500 POWs like still probably alive inside North Vietnam. And as intel analysts kept going over these pictures, looking at the compound itself, they thought initially there may have been like 5 POWs in here, and then that estimate grew to 50 and ultimately kind of settled around 70 people in the camp. So these are some problems specific to Son Tay. So as the reconnaissance flights were flying over, they found like this K symbol made out of rocks. And at the time, K was like this thing that they were telling aviators and kind of people that have the potential to be captured. A K is simple to make, and it identifies that there are like Americans imprisoned or trapped in a specific area behind enemy lines. So they're flying over, they see this K symbol, which kind of confirms their suspicion that there might be a POW camp here. First problem tactically is that when I'll show you pictures of this, when you look at Son Tay, it was surrounded by rice paddies for hundreds of meters in all directions. And the problem there, of course, is that you can't really sneak in. Rice paddies, they flood in the spring so that you can grow the rice, and then they kind of go barren in the fall as all the rice is harvested. So you can't really sneak up on this camp. Probably a bigger problem was there was a North Vietnamese regiment of about 12,000 people located north of Son Tay. There was also a North Vietnamese artillery school, a supply depot, and they had just recently begun putting an air defense artillery installation, which is used to shoot down at this time American aircraft, jets and helicopters and things like that. So tactically, it's made it extremely difficult for how we're going to actually deal with this situation. So this is kind of a picture from 1970 of Son Tay camp. It's hard to tell what we're looking at here because the pictures are old, but this is what the analysts had to go by at the time. This was kind of before we had effective satellite imagery and all the stuff we have now. So you can see there's sort of a river on the left side. There's a road that runs north. And then kind of the camp itself over here, like on the left portion of it, you'll see some drawings of this here shortly, is the actual prison compound. So due to the close proximity of 12,000 plus enemy soldiers and the air defense systems, any kind of raid that was going to be conducted against Sante would have to be extremely quick. We know we talk about general concept when you're conducting a raid. One of the things that distinguishes a raid from kind of more general purpose attacks is that you have and rehearse a planned withdrawal. So the idea of a raid is that you execute this attack. You're not there to seize or maintain any kind of terrain or anything like that. You're there for a specific purpose, whether it be focused on destroying enemy, recovering something, in this case recovering American soldiers, aviators and things like that. We have a planned withdrawal. And then another problem is they were flying these unmanned drones over the Sante camp, and the pictures they were getting back would kind of confuse the analysts because sometimes it would look like Sante might be actually shutting down because there'd be less stuff going on, there'd be less vehicles, fewer people able to be identified on the imagery, and then other times it would look like they were actually expanding. At one point they thought they were building an additional guard tower, they were reinforcing the compound walls. And this kind of ties back to the idea of risk. So we know, just generally speaking, the enemy situation makes this risky in and of itself because of the thousands and thousands of enemy soldiers in the area, air defense, artillery, all that stuff. But then all the unknowns of even wondering, there was a lot of confusion at this time as to whether or not Russia or China, who were helping North Vietnam, had somehow known about our plans to conduct this raid to free these prisoners. So there was concern, like, what if we get into Sante and it's actually a big trap? They've been kind of baiting us this whole time. There's a lot of secrecy surrounding this operation in general. So, like we said, proximity to Hanoi, which is the capital city of North Vietnam at the time, proximity of these 12,000 soldiers, all these other things meant that a traditional ground assault would not be feasible. You couldn't get people in fast enough, dismounted, to conduct a raid and actually get back out of the area before these thousands of North Vietnamese soldiers are converging on you. So we knew at this point the raid element had to be small enough to avoid detection, but large enough to kind of overwhelmingly address the guards at the camp. You also had to consider the fact that if there were 50 to 70 POWs here, how do we get these people back out as well? And this is another problem that we dealt with. Here's a terrain model. So the CIA built this terrain model. This was at Eglin Air Force Base. You can now, if you actually go to Fort Bragg, you can see this at the Special Warfare School there. So they built this terrain model. We do the same sorts of things, and you can see that this goes back, again, this is 1970, so we're talking 50 years ago. People are still looking at doing terrain models, obviously not to this level of detail, but this was something that was kind of authorized by the president, it was Nixon at the time, the president, to undergo this. So the terrain model they had was built to this ridiculous level, but this is what we're looking at. So you can see kind of on the upper portion of this, you've got the compound that's walled in itself. That was where they suspected the prisoners are being held. You can see kind of the rice paddies, the lakes and things around there, different buildings that house guards and things like that. So again, the concept of terrain models and stuff is still relevant today, 50 years later. We have not found a better way for people to visualize how to do these things. And you've probably discovered by now that having access to some kind of a terrain model allows you to stand over it with your peers and sort of talk through how you want to do things and kind of visualize the terrain. So the night of the 20th, going into the 21st, they've been doing a lot of planning months and months prior to this. So around October, this guy, Colonel Simmons, had gone to Bragg, and they put out this request for, anybody that's got these specific skill set. They didn't tell them what the mission was. Anybody who has these specific skills can volunteer to kind of take part in this. So like over 500 people responded. Of those 500, they selected 100 guys that they thought would be kind of best suited to kind of conduct this sort of operation. And they started training for months in isolation. They were training in Eglin Air Force Base. And then, again, the big concern was the enemy kind of compromising this plan and having this coordinated response to us sending in all these people. So they go from Eglin Air Force Base. We hit October. They start infiltrating all these people into like Thailand and Laos and the surrounding areas. So the night of the 20th November, 1970, they get on all these aircraft, and the Army, Navy, Air Force begins this huge undertaking to synchronize all these deception plans across North Vietnam. So you've got the suppression of enemy air defenses. So basically, these bombers and things are flying in, they're dropping bombs on the air defense systems. They're also trying to draw the radar's attention away from the planned flight that these aircraft are going to infill in. You've got the Navy is like shooting North Vietnamese ports with naval gunfire, all these different things. So the raid task organized itself into 3 elements, which again, we can look 50 years later, it's the same concept, right? So you have an assault element. The plan here was that one of these aircraft, this HH-3 Echo, was actually going to kind of do a controlled crash landing inside that actual walled-in compound. The thought here was like, we're going to capitalize on kind of the audacity of showing up basically like at their front step, and then the surprise of the enemy Navy thinking somehow a helicopter had crashed, American helicopter, Chinese helicopter, they wouldn't know initially, had crashed in this compound, which is going to allow the assault element to kind of capitalize on that element of surprise. So here, kind of the concept of the assault element crash landing, we're looking at audacity and surprise primarily, plus the tempo we talked about previously. Your support element is going to be the guys carrying at this time the M60s, which are like your 240s, the M79, which was the 40mm grenade launcher at the time. And these guys' job is, again, what support elements do, which is to provide suppressive fires to allow the assault element to do their job. And then the security element is coming in to establish blocking positions, which is, again, to buy time for the assault element to do their job. So 2:19 in the morning, the assault element arrives at Sabote. And if you recall last week, one of the things we talked about was kind of remembering that no matter how well you plan something, everything that you depend on is provided by people, right? So you telling your support element to go somewhere to climb a ridge or whatever to set their machine guns up, people will get lost and people will get tired or confused and they might end up in the wrong spot. So those things will happen. At this time was probably the most highly rehearsed operation since something that may have happened in World War II, 25, 30 years prior. We had literally the best naval aviators, the best Air Force crew, the best soldiers in the Army, all put into this one thing, which was rehearsed for months and months and months, and lots of things still went wrong. The first thing that went wrong, you can see this compound right here. The imagery looked like those trees they were looking at pictures of were like 40 feet tall. When the aircraft showed up, trees were like 3 times that height. They were over 150 feet in some areas, and the helicopter actually ended up basically flying into a tree and cutting it down before it kind of did this controlled crash landing inside the compound. A support element, which is led by the senior ranking guy, this Colonel Simmons, a full bird colonel, who was like the kind of overall guy in charge of this. Their aircraft actually got lost, misidentified where they were supposed to land, and landed 400 meters south at a second compound, which was known as a secondary school. The interesting thing about this at this time was that the secondary school was being used to house a bunch of Chinese military officers. They were there to train the North Vietnamese Army on how to use the air defense artillery systems that were being installed in that area. The morning of 21 November, when the support element landed at this compound, there was an estimated 100 to 200 Chinese instructors, all officer cadre, inside this compound, up against this kind of 30 to 40 man support element that just flew in on an aircraft and is in a completely wrong spot. Then last, we've got our security element. Security element flies in from the south. They use a minigun to just absolutely destroy a guard tower. They blew up a utility pole, like a power pole. The idea there was they're going to knock out lights and still kind of continue to add to the confusion of what's going on and capitalize on surprise and the audacity of these helicopters showing up at 2 in the morning completely unannounced. They dismounted their aircraft. They went and established a blocking position, kind of oriented in the direction of that secondary school, which is about 400 meters to the south. And they engaged a force that was moving up to kind of figure out what was going on with this helicopter kind of crashing and then the sounds of gunfire coming to the north. The security element established a blocking position and destroyed sort of force that was moving to reinforce the Sante compound. If you recall back, the idea of a security element is kind of looking to isolate objectives for the assault element. So here what we're trying to do, this security element's purpose was to prevent people from moving up into the compound. The assault element felt confident they could address whatever was in the compound itself. Security element was there to kind of prevent additional people from moving in. So remember, your security element here, we can talk about them isolating an objective, which is preventing people from reinforcing it. Security elements can also be used to prevent people from moving off the objective. Here's an overall picture on the right of what everything looked like. So again, we've got our assault element there kind of in the center of the picture where it says Meadows. Captain Meadows was the leader of the assault element. They land, they dismount the aircraft, and they start clearing through this compound looking for these POWs. Down below that, we've got our security element setting up blocking positions, destroying that guard tower, preventing that secondary school from responding to the south. And then actually south of Sante itself, we've got the secondary school where the support element kind of misidentified their objective, confused the secondary school with the Sante compound. They were supposed to land right outside it. They land hundreds of meters away. Actually, the grand scheme of things, this may have been beneficial because of the 100 to 200 people down there that nobody knew about. The support element was actually able to kind of get into a gunfight with these guys and ended up killing a fair number of them before they actually got back on their aircraft, moved a couple hundred meters north, and rejoined the main fight. So the assault element is clearing through this compound. They've identified there are no POWs in this building. Again, they've been rehearsing this for months. There's a lot of uncertainty about whether or not there were actually still people here. 2:40 a.m., which is about 31 minutes after they landed, they report negative items over the radio. Negative items was kind of their code word at the time for no POWs on the camp. They begin boarding their aircraft and they depart the area. This is kind of an after picture of the Sante camp. The actual reason that this was not effective in a tactical sense, it didn't accomplish its actual primary objective, was actually because the well at Sante had started drying up in May. So all the prisoners were gone from the camp by July. So we have these kind of reconnaissance aircraft flying over, taking pictures, and they're saying, oh, it looks like they might be gone, but maybe they're moving more people in. We can't really tell. And in fact, it was just kind of this situation where the well in the area had dried up, and they moved these POWs about 15 miles to another camp. Kind of strategic impact of this was that North Vietnam started worrying if America is willing to do this, conduct these kind of middle of the night assaults with 100 people flying in on helicopters to kind of rescue POWs. We can't just have POWs kind of strung out all over the country. They ended up reconsolidating everybody into two camps in Hanoi, their capital, which is, if you kind of look at the Hanoi Hilton, that concept, that's where it was. And the big second order effect of this was the POWs were oftentimes at this point kind of held in isolation. When North Vietnam had to kind of reconsolidate all their people back together, big benefit here for the POWs was they get to be around each other again. They're in this kind of consolidated prison camps, and they actually started receiving kind of better care and better treatment at this point because they weren't just being held by some enemy company off in the middle of the jungle. So kind of lessons learned from this and how this ties into everything else that we've talked about. So the idea ultimately for your assault element is to like get onto the objective and execute your assault. Again, if that's to destroy something, in this instance, and try to recover personnel, the real goal is to get your assault element onto the objective. Now, we're doing this on the ground. It means your assault element physically has to kind of walk or run onto the objective. And we do this by having a support element that's like providing these suppressive fires, which allows our assault element to get onto the objective. In this case, based on the terrain and access to aircraft and things like that, it wasn't feasible to have the assault element walk in, so they had to fly in. We do similar things like this even now in the Army. If you guys end up going into combat arms, I was leaving Fort Lewis, a big push over, at least in my battalion, was we were developing like this fast growth capability. And fries is where, you know, you're in a Chinook or a Black Hawk and the ropes go out and it's not really repelling because you're just kind of controlled falling out of the aircraft holding onto the rope. And this is a way to quickly get an assault element onto an objective when there's not a better way to do it. It's extraordinarily dangerous for a bunch of reasons, but again, if the goal is to get your assault element on the objective, there's a lot of ways to do this. But traditionally, we do this by placing our security, which isolates that objective so people can't move in or out, provides that observation. We move our support element in. Support element, again, their primary job is to support the assault element as they move on to the objective. And we do this oftentimes through the support element providing those direct fires from their machine guns, indirect fire from mortar systems and things like that. And that allows the assault element to kind of close that distance and get onto the objective. So what we're going to do now, we're going to kind of flip to the end of this. Mr. Howard is going to sort of take over this portion of it. So we're going to present you a scenario. You'll have kind of the terrain situation. Generally, we've got some graphics for you to look at. And then kind of break down into teams. Or if I don't know what the count is. I can't see how many people are here. We're going to break down into groups, though. You guys are going to sort of talk through the planning process. This is exactly what you're going to be doing if you go to OAL. Same concept of being tasked to kind of conduct a raid and attack, defensive operation, whatever it is. But the process of how we're going to look at sequencing this stuff in. So you're provided a terrain, enemy situation, a mission statement, and then we'll kind of talk through how we do this. We're here to kind of guide this, talk through this. So if you hit areas that you're not sure on, we're here to kind of guide this process. Again, if you feel as an NCO or something like that, former NCO, that you're extremely comfortable with this, then kind of help your group through the process. Let them talk through it. The goal here is that we learn stuff and whatnot, just showing how smart we are. So I'm going to flip through all this stuff too far. So we'll flip through all this stuff, give you guys some graphics, and then Mr. Howard's going to kind of take over and describe this, and then we'll get started. All right, Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Sergeant Regan. Morning, all y'all. Well, I was counting how many people there were in here, so I figured out how many groups to have, and then all of a sudden people started dropping off when you said something about PE. So, motivation. Hey, look, we've been struggling how to figure out through this virtual means how to allow you to demonstrate your knowledge, and so that we understand where you're at, and that way we can tailor a better plan to help you out. And this is just something that we come up with. If it sucks and it doesn't work, please tell me that, so I won't ever use it again. If it's all right, then we might use it again. All right, so more or less what we talked about is that we're going to give you a mission. You have some graphics, you got a map, and then we're going to talk through the planning factors of this mission based on what Sergeant Ream's class and all the principles of attack. And on the next slide, which all of you guys should have received in your email. If you haven't, please go in your email, open it up. And the whole point of this is for your group to take over the sharing portion in WebEx, and to talk through your plan or to move your icons around so that we can see what you're thinking or how you're thinking as we talk through each of these, whether it's the planning factors, whether it's tactics or whatever. So if you did receive it, please hit up Sheehan and Barnes and Anderson. I'll send it to them. Sorry, I don't have everybody's email.
Hey everyone, it's Anderson. It was actually sent out via Discord to all the MS chats.
Okay, so what you're looking at here, this is a map of Camp Bullis, using Sergeant Ream's favorite website, Topo.
Caltopo.
Yeah, caltopo.com. It's a very good site. You can make your own maps. Anyway, here we got TS1. We got a company area, Alpha Company. You can see to the upper left. Let's see if I can get control of this. Say your request to annotate. Over on the left side, you got 1st Platoon in the center, and 2nd Platoon and 3rd on the right. is third platoon. So your boundaries were not drawn on here because I just didn't have time to go through that. So the north-south running grid line 4-0 and 4-1 will be your boundaries between platoons. So from top to bottom of that map is the second platoon boundary, which you are second platoon. Your light infantry platoon and your current location, as you can see over there in the task org, is November Tango 407784. That's net patrol base. Now, if you have the map and you break out the protractor, you might see that I might have just quickly made that number up. So if it's not completely right, that's okay. We'll just go with the graphics, so they're intent graphics. So here's the situation over there to the right. What you're facing in the area is the company is facing platoon minus Op 4. In the second platoon's AO, there's a squad of approximately 7 or 9 folks. They got AK-47s and a light machine gun per squad. They also have short range radios that work out to about 2 to 3 kilometers. The current disposition is they're defending this communication site right there. They've been fighting for a while, so they're tired. They just got to this site. We think that we just got to this site. So they got hasty fighting positions there. And reinforcements could arrive at the site via the unimproved trail roads in about 30 minutes. Most likely, they believe they will defend that until they are completely overwhelmed, and then they will withdraw. Most dangerous is they will stay there until they can at least hold out for 30 minutes until this reinforcements can get there. And that's a squad plus initially within 30 minutes with the machine gun. Any questions so far?
Mr. Howard? What is the distinction between most likely course of action and most dangerous course of action? This is to the cadets here sitting in. What's the difference between the two? And don't say one's like what they're going to do and one's what they might do that would really hurt us. Why does this matter? How do we use this information as far as most likely?
Oh, good question. So if we're on the attack, we're using the principles of attack that Sergeant Ring talked about. If you are able to have surprise, you have a fast tempo, concentrate your fires. Once they realize that they are outnumbered, they cannot get the overwhelming firepower, they're not going to stay there. They value their lives more than their mission, so they will withdraw. So that's really what the distinction is. If you just roll up there and just casually engage with them, they're going to fight you until they get reinforcements there. But once they know they're getting their ass whooped, they're moving out. So if you employ the principles that Sergeant Ring was talking about, then you have a higher chance of quick win. Does that answer your question, Sergeant Ring?
Yeah, it does. So again, remember, like, the most likely course of action is how we expect the enemy to fight. So this is going to be like 90% of our plan is going to be built to address the most likely course of action. The most dangerous course of action is something that you, as whoever's in charge of this operation, you as a platoon leader, you got to have kind of, it's not something you necessarily rehearse. You need to have thought through what is the most dangerous course of action going to look like? Like, how am I going to understand that this is actually happening right now? And then what will I do if it does happen? So we're talking about there's a squad of 7 to 9 dudes on your objective. But the most dangerous course of action is they're delaying, which means you're not able to kind of set that high tempo, like Mr. Howard said, overwhelm the enemy, and you allow them to delay so that they're not getting beat. They're just kind of holding their own. How do I know when this other squad has showed up? Well, if you hear that machine gun going off, that kind of medium caliber 240 or PKM or whatever it is going off, you now know that maybe you've met your most dangerous course of action criteria because these additional people are showing up. So again, for planning purposes, our operation is going to follow the most likely course of action. We need to think, though, how to identify the most dangerous course of action is happening, and what do I do when it starts to happen? So you're not kind of caught flat-footed, and all of a sudden the enemy is able to turn that fight, gain that initiative, and start setting their own tempo or dictating the pace of the fight. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Howard.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Like I said, we're going to plan for the most likely and our organic elements are probably going to be focused on that most likely. But anything that we can get extra that's supporting our forces, like attack aviation, CAS, fire support, or even our left and right buddies to help us out with that mission, we can apply that combat power towards the most dangerous and to be prepared for that. Great point. All right, so you can read the mission statement there. Any questions over that so far? Anybody have any questions? So that's Sergeant Ream.
No, sir.
Okay, so let's get down to execution, concept operations. We want 1st Platoon to be in position before 2nd Platoon kicks off their raid, and 3rd Platoon to do the attack simultaneously, so it's not sending an early indicator to other enemy elements out there that an attack is coming. Scheme of fires, there's no other fire support available except for company mortars, and 2nd Platoon has priority fires. The disaster over to 2nd Platoon, and no later than 12 o'clock, conduct your raid on this communication site there. Supporting effort or supporting operation number 1 is 1st Platoon. Conduct that, be prepared to, or the ambush will be set no later than 11:30 in case the reinforcements are triggered. And then supporting operation number 2 is attack on the weapons cache. All right, so down below at the very bottom, you see a timeline. So let's just say to now is 8 o'clock. You're receiving your company mission. At 10 o'clock, it's when you're crossing the LD. And crossing the LD, which is not annotated on here, just say it was within 100 meters of your patrol base, your current position. And then 11:30 is when the ambush is set for 1st Platoon, and 12 o'clock is when you're commence the attacks for 2nd, 3rd Platoon. So really the idea of this is to give you some kind of construct and something to work with as we go back through and talk about the principles and how they apply to the planning process or the troop leading procedure to get to this point. Are there any questions right now? Okay, if you can go to the second slide, please, sir. All right, so on the left side, you see your macro. You got 2nd Platoon up there and your patrol base, and you have the raid down there. So using this, you'll be able to determine your routes, how you're going to movement, what the rate of movement is going to be, where your release point or your rally points are going to be at, your RP, seals, all that stuff, and your approach on there. The one on the right is the macro, or the macro of the objective. And the ones you received off to the right of the slide, there's a bunch of icons on there with support, assault, security, platoon leader, platoon sergeant, I believe a CCP in there. And you can array those forces on this so that you can talk through. You declined my request.
Oh, sorry. I just clicked close. I don't know what it was.
All right. Good enough. Anybody have any questions? So we're going to kind of go through this. Those questions that is entitled Putting It All Together, as you can see up there, slides 47 through 60. He's going to talk to you through about here we're on we got this mission. What are some of the elements that we could be thinking about? And here is the mission specifically that you can talk about instead of trying to talk about this in some fantasy world. Now you have some concrete information to be able to develop input.
Okay, so remember, the goal of this thing is not for you guys to write an op order. It's like I'm speaking just for myself as an NCO. I'm less concerned with the order and more concerned with execution, right? Like, how do we actually do this? I've sat through plenty of really good op orders and cars and things like that completely fell apart because people couldn't link the two things together. So what we're really looking at is for you guys to talk through the kind of nuts and bolts of how we actually do this thing. How do we get our people where we need them to be? How do we initiate our raid? And how do we sequence all this stuff as it actually has to happen? So don't get hung up in trying to write the best mission statement or kind of the most complex paragraph 3. Let's talk. We break down into groups and then kind of come back. Let's talk about how we're actually going to do this thing. That's what you're going to be evaluated at OAL, or if you go to CST later on, leadership attributes and competencies is your actual ability to kind of make this thing happen, and less about how to write a really good op order or anything like that. Mr. Howard, do you have an idea for breakdown for groups? You're muted.
That's usually when I have the best. Anyway, yeah. As I'm looking at it, actually, we can break down into 3 groups here. Willis Sheehan and Josh Clennon. Sorry. That's one group. I'm just reading these screen names here. Milo, Anderson, and Click. And then you got like Onshort, Ernie. I love it. Is Burn in here too? Escamilla in the 3rd group. And then Barnes, you and Blanchard make up the 4th group. That work for you?
All right, so if you're a ADO, you're responsible for kind of establishing your group. So just do that on build your own WebEx. You're not sure who you're responsible for. Mr. Howard can kind of put that out again, but again, ADOs, build your group at 10:15, which is in 30 minutes. We'll come back through and you guys will have about 10 minutes to talk through your plan. If you run into situations when you don't have a good answer, then we can kind of help through that process. Again, the goal is that you guys have a better understanding of this when we're done and getting started. So if you feel comfortable, let somebody else in your group kind of do the talking and kind of refine their decision making.
And then use the graphics over there, use the icons and move them, put them on your screen or move them around when you talk through them. And like you said, it's more important about you understanding why you're doing what you're doing, not is it right, are the tactics right? I mean, as I looked at it last night going, well, how would I attack this objective? I realized, man, this place is in a really shitty place. This would be a hard attack. So if I had the A-team van, I might come streaming up that road, but we don't. So anyway, those are the questions we're going to ask: is why are you choosing this? Not hey, this thing tactically sucks. Questions?
This is Schwartner. Who's on my team again?
Willis and Josh Clennon. For the screen same is. Who's that?
Here, we'll
Okay.
put it in the chat.
No. Okay, you got it. Go ahead. I guess who's Josh Clennon?
He's will be an MS2 this year.
Oh, okay.
Right,
Yeah.
so Barnes and Escamilla, you're a group of 2. Congratulations. Okay, so again, ADOs. Oh, all right, Barnes. So Escamilla, go ahead and join the 3rd group. So Escamilla, you can get in with Bay, Click, and Blanchard. So ADOs, go ahead and start your. Okay, well, people have to drop off. Here's what we'll do instead. So we're going to talk through this just as a large group with people having to leave at 10 o'clock. We'll talk through in one big group, kind of get everybody in on this. So the first thing we're going to look at, we'll just kind of deviate here. First thing we'll look at, we know that we're conducting a raid, right? So this is the first question here on this raid, and you guys can refer to your PowerPoint. How much time do we have? Why is this significant? It's just to anybody.
This is Sheehan. I would say it's significant because of the most likely and most deadly courses of action. Uh, if we plan and execute quicker than taking our time, basically in a race with the reinforcements, more or less. So if we act on the most likely course of action, then more than likely that they will retreat.
Okay, that's good. What about so let's say that in Mr. Howard's kind of graphics he sent out, I think it says that you need to initiate your attack by 12 o'clock, and in the scenario it's like 8 o'clock right now. So we've identified that we have 4 hours start to finish before we have to start conducting our actions on it. In 4 hours, everybody's got to be in place, and the support element's going to initiate, our assault element's going to start moving. So what's the significance then of understanding that we have 4 hours to do all these things? Why does that matter?
This is Clip. It's important because we need to understand how to allocate our time for planning and also for movement as well. So applying the 1/3, 2/3 rule approximately to the situation.
What is the 1/3, 2/3? What does that mean?
When you're planning any sort of mission, you should allocate 1/3 of the time to planning and 2/3 to execution.
Okay, so if you look in the manual, and that's one take on it. If you look in the actual doctrine for this, when the Army talks about 1/3, 2/3, it's talking about allotting 2/3 of the time to your subordinates to do their planning. So the example, like in the ADP, talks about if you're going to conduct an operation in 2 days, 1/3 of that would be something like 18 hours or whatever, and then the other 2/3, that 36 hours, whatever it is, I guess it'd be 28, something like that. That other time allows your subordinates to do the things that they need to do. So you think about like as a company commander, which you guys will be one day. Think about as a company commander. You as a commander of a company are going to like have to maneuver your platoons around, but your platoons are the ones that actually have to do all the real stuff involved in your operation. So they probably need more time at their level to rehearse the specifics of how do I get my platoon in this raid. My platoon is the DO, the decisive operation, or the assault element. How do I get them onto the objective and do this? So they're going to require more time to plan and rehearse that than you will when you're just saying my platoon is going to kind of, you as a commander, my platoon is going to move on to the objective, and you're moving a graphic around, but that platoon actually has to look at like, where do my people go? So yeah, the 1/3, 2/3 rule, again, the Army struggles to kind of adhere to this, but the idea is like that your subordinates have 2/3 of the total time allotted for planning available to do the things that they need to do. So they're going to plan their piece, they're going to rehearse that. And you as a platoon leader at OAL, CST, or real platoon leader should keep that in mind as well. If you've got your squads, you're again conceptually saying like first squad is going to be the assault element, and they're moving the block on your terrain model up onto there. But that squad actually has to talk about where do I put the people in my squads, where are my teams going to be, and they're going to rehearse all the parts of that, how they actually conduct that assault. So there's always levels below you that need time to do what they have to do too. They can't just be sitting around waiting for you to give them the information they need to plan. They've got a lot of stuff they have to do also. So as you said, adhering to the kind of 1/3, 2/3 rule here will allow all your subordinates to have enough time to do what they need to do. It also lets us know how much time we can actually dedicate to planning. So we're saying that from 8 to noon, we've got 4 hours. We need to step off by 10 o'clock. We can start looking backwards, which is kind of the whole goal of this idea of backwards planning. If we're starting, our hit time is 12 o'clock. We know everybody's got to be in place by 12, so we can start working backwards from there and say, okay, no later than 11:50, everybody's going to be in position. What are all the things that happened before that? And you work your way backwards to right now. One of the kind of common stumbling blocks, and you'll see this at OAL with people, people want to plan like in sequence, right? They want to start from like, okay, it's 8 o'clock. What do we got to do? Well, we're in the patrol base. So at 9 o'clock, we're going to step off. And you will see people run out of time trying to plan this thing because they're starting at right now and working forward in time the same way they're actually going to execute the patrol. An important thing to remember is like if your mission is to conduct a raid or conduct an attack, whatever it is, that's the actual important thing. So that's probably where you need to dedicate the beginning of your planning to, is the actual actions on your objective. Like, so we're looking at these terrain model or the imagery Mr. Howard provided, and we're looking at that objective and saying, okay, where's my support element going to be? Where's my security going to be? Where's my assault going to be? How do I actually conduct the assault? Because worst case scenario, let's say you have to choose. You can choose between having a really good route to your objective and then just trying to play it by ear when you're conducting the assault, or you can have a good assault plan and kind of wing your movement over there. And if you have a kind of time-constrained environment, you may have to choose between which part of the operation do I plan? Do I plan the beginning portion or do I plan the end? If you have to choose, you obviously need to plan your actions on the objective. So looking at how much time we have is going to allow us to know how much time we have to plan. And now we can start this backwards planning process of starting the most important part and working our way back. So once we know how much time we have, disregard attack to destroy, we kind of deviated to a raid. Once we know how much time we have, we can start looking at what we know about the enemy. But why does this matter? Okay. So, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Cadet Bay. So it matters what we know about the enemy because then we're able to plan accordingly to their, like if they're near peer, so we know exactly what their munitions are, what their capabilities are, what the size of their squads. So we know exactly how to.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned through kind of trial and error, it was never taught to me, and I wish it was. It would have made my life easier. And you're gonna see all this stuff at OAL, which is why I'm telling you about it now to kind of spare you the heartache. When people plan, they look at like, where do I want to be? So you're looking at the imagery, right, of your macro of like, I'm up here and my objective's down here, and you look at the micro, this is our objective area, and you start by saying, okay, where's the best spot to put my machine guns? Where's the best spot to put my assault element? Where's my security going to be? The problem with that is that you're moving into terrain that the enemy already controls, right? So the enemy has done the same thing, and they're looking at, I've got to defend this site. Where's the best spot to put my security elements? Where's the best spot to put my roving patrols? Where are the best kind of fields of fire for my machine guns? And obviously, because they're already there, they've already got all the good spots. So if we want to use those positions, we either need to force the enemy off them or look at something else. So what I want you guys to remember here is we're looking at what do we know about the enemy? Remember the concept of green, red, and blue, right? There's a thing called a GTAO. It's a graphic terrain analysis overlay. And the idea here, when I talk about green, red, blue, green is like the terrain itself. So we remove all humans from it, and we're just saying this is a hill, this is a draw, there's a trail here. This is what we know as far as the science of this stuff. This is the terrain. It's immutable. This is not going to change. Once we've identified what terrain is and how that's going to influence what we're doing, we transition over to red, which is the enemy. So green, red, blue. Red is where's the enemy going to be? If I were the enemy and I had to defend this site, or this was my area that I live at, what's the best spots that I can kind of look at the imagery or the terrain, the green? Where would I put myself if I were the enemy? And then that allows us to have a better picture of how we conduct this, which is the blue. So we've got the terrain. We've identified, you guys remember the five aspects of military terrain, your OACOC. Once we look at that, we look at where's the enemy going to be because it's the best place for them to be from their perspective. Now we look at where are we going to be. Again, the trap here is a lot of people will put themselves on the map first, and then they're going to like put the enemy in after the fact and say, well, it's really good to have machine guns here because I could shoot people over there. But if that's like a big open field, the enemy's not going to be out there anyway. They're not stupid. They're going to be on the hill that you want to be on. They're already going to be there waiting for you. So how do we address that? So we know how much time we have. This allows us to start backwards planning and looking at the actual objective and then working our way back. We know where we think the enemy is likely to be based on the terrain. Where would I be if I lived there? Or if that was my area already, I had to establish security. Now we can kind of move forward. How do we actually plan this? And this is the big question. I kind of already gave the hint away as one good technique to use. Again, we start at the end, and we work our way backwards, doing this kind of backwards planning, in this maximize effective use of our time. Because if it takes us, we got 45 minutes to plan, and it takes us 30 minutes to get a good plan for actions on the objective. We've done this in reverse. That 30 minutes might have been us talking about, okay, so what formation should we be in? Where's first squad going to be in? Where's my ORP going to be in? How am I going to do my leader's recon? So we're starting the end, we're working our way backwards. So we understand here, we're talking backwards planning now. We're going to fast forward all the way to the objective. We've got, if you guys have got that imagery up, we've got that little antenna with the C-wire around it. Excuse me, there's a trail running in on the eastern side. How do we actually set our security in there? So we can look at the micro or the macro and identify these trail networks. We know the purpose of security is to isolate the objective, prevent people from moving on or prevent people from moving off it. Looking at that macro terrain model, I'm not going to insult your intelligence. The obvious spots to set our security are going to be on those trails, right? We're looking for, again, these necessary aspects of terrain, your high-speed avenues of approach. These trail networks are going to allow the enemy to reinforce that position the most rapidly. So if we're saying that we anticipate them having about 30-minute response time, that 30 minutes is probably them moving down the trails and not them traveling cross country. So our security element probably needs to orient on these trails to prevent people from moving in to reinforce. So we're isolating the objective. We're also looking at, can the security element keep people from moving off the objective along these same high-speed avenues of approach. Next, we're looking at how do we set our support in. So I will ask you guys, again, what is the purpose of your support element? Nobody? I know I'm doing a lot of talking and I didn't want it to be this way. Clennon, what's the purpose of the support element?
Sergeant, is it to be there to, I don't know how to describe it without using the support in the thing, but it's kind of there to just support the assault element, kind of be that.
Okay, how do they do this?
They set up at a point. I don't really know how to do it when conducting an attack on something.
Okay, so these are universal concepts. Remember, the ultimate goal here is that we get our assault element on the objective. And there's any number of ways you can do this, but the traditional way is we set our support element up, and they're going to shoot their machine guns onto the objective area or near it, which is going to force the enemy on the objective to kind of keep their head down. Again, if we're looking at a doctrinal term, we want our support element to fix the enemy. We say fix, we mean that we prevent them from repositioning on the battlefield. So our machine guns are going to shoot onto the objective. That's going to keep the guys on that objective area from moving around, responding to our assault element. So again, the goal of the support element is to allow the assault element to get onto the objective. We're going to do this oftentimes by emplacing our machine guns or belt-fed weapons because they have a high rate of fire. If you've got sniper weapons, they can employ precision fires against targets. If you've got mortars, mortars can employ indirect fires against your objective area. But again, the ultimate goal of the support element is to allow the assault element to get onto the objective. So how do we do this? We're going to talk through here shortly. Well, you guys are going to talk through here shortly. This is a recap. All right, how do we set our assault element? Again, what is the assault element looking to do? And that's a question to anybody. What's the purpose of the assault element?
It's to obtain the objective or capture the objective.
Yeah, absolutely. The assault element is the guys that are actually doing whatever the purpose of your patrol is. So your purpose in this instance is a raid to destroy a communication site. Your assault element is going to be the people that actually go up to that communication site and destroy the equipment. So again, we look at like how we resource stuff, ensuring that your assault element is equipped to do whatever their job is. If they've got to destroy a communication site, do they have the equipment necessary to do that? So if you're the assault element guy, that's a question you should be asking. When you're telling me I got to destroy a retrans site or a radio tower or whatever it is, how am I going to do that? Am I going to use demo? Okay, if it's just an antenna, can I just go in and knock it down and break it? There's a bunch of ways to do this stuff, but your assault element, again, is doing the actual mission. Support element is allowing assault to get close enough to do it, and your security element is kind of isolating that area and allowing the assault element. So support is focused primarily in, your security element can be focused out, or they can be focused in depending on what you think is most important. Okay, so now let's talk about how we actually do this. So we're going to back up a little bit. We know if we're going to sequence this stuff in, probably the best way to do this is we're going to put our security elements in very first. Why is this kind of the preferred method, generally speaking?
This is Schwerner. I can answer that.
All right.
It's because you kind of have, it's like putting out your outline on like say if you were doing a drawing, it's like your outline and then you work inward and also you control anything coming in or out to your plan that you're creating or at least setting forth. I feel like
yes, absolutely. So we look at like the security element. If they're like the first people to go in, they're doing a bunch of stuff, right? They can begin kind of that continuous reconnaissance. They probably won't be able to see your objective because of maybe terrain or vegetation or whatever. But they're kind of there again. We got to put a term on it. They're there to isolate that objective. So as you said, they're kind of going in and they're establishing those boundaries around that objective, saying like, this is my left limit, this is my right limit. I'm not letting anybody move in once this thing starts. Now, they may have to let people kind of bypass them as everything else is getting set up, and they're just maybe sending information back saying, hey, there's a vehicle coming in. You guys probably want to hold up for a few minutes. And that allows you as the platoon leader or whoever to kind of halt movement and figure out what's going on. So they're going to be first thing they're doing is like establishing that observation, which allows you to kind of safely move everybody else in. So how do we go about putting our security elements into place?
Leaders recon?
Yeah, well, let's talk through that then.
So from what I'm familiar with is we usually take a leader from each squad of the platoon, go out, find yourself, I forgot what it's called, but you found like a rally point. Oh yeah, rally point. Then you go out, you do you kind of send one off in one direction, or the security leader element into one direction, and then you take another group to the other area and kind of scout around, and then come back and meet and kind of survey what you've seen.
Okay, so yeah, if we're talking about the leaders recon specifically, you could take different types of people on your leaders recon. If we're talking about just as a general concept, your whole security squad is probably going to go on the leaders recon because they're going to go into their spots and just stay there once we get them into position. So you're going to move from your ORP to your release point, like you said. The release point, we look at like a doctrinal concept. Your release point or your RP is like when all your elements they're moving forward, they spread out to do their individual things. They're released to do their job, and if we're coming back, it's where everybody reconsolidates back in. So talking about the leaders recon, like you said, there's a whole bunch of ways to do this, and some of it's going to be dependent on how many security positions you think you need. Maybe there's only one really relevant spot based on the terrain, because maybe you're attacking into like, terrain that kind of boxes everybody in. There's only one way in and one way out. Our security element, we probably just need one big security element there. Maybe they're spread across the area to cover gaps and things like that. But you don't have to have two. And if you need more than two, you can make more than two. Maybe there's a bunch of trails and you've got to break that security squad down into 3 or 4 pieces. So we've already looked at the map back in our planning process earlier. We're assuming we've done this because we're talking about actions on. We've identified a couple spots based on military aspects of terrain, your OTOC, that are likely for the enemy to move through. It's a high-speed avenue of approach or whatever it is. That doesn't always mean a trail. It could mean like you've got really bad terrain, but there's one kind of small valley or clear draw that they can move through. That's the fastest way to get through there. That's probably also a high-speed avenue. So we've identified those things that we've said we need X amount of security teams, and then we're going to build them appropriately. So you're just telling the security squad leader, I need 3 security teams. It's their responsibility as a squad leader to figure out what do those teams look like. So again, we're only kind of going that one level down. So maybe your security squad leader takes a team, and you as the platoon leader take the other team and you in place them. You can do that. If you don't trust them at all because maybe they're not good at navigating or whatever it is, you've got a dud as a security squad leader, maybe you've got to go and place both those teams because you don't think they're going to be able to get to the right spot. Maybe your security squad team leaders are studs and you can just point to the map and say, go here, and this is what I want you to do, and you can trust that they're going to be able to do that without any input from you. So you as a leader, that's kind of the art of leadership, right, is understanding your soldiers and knowing what their capabilities and their limitations are. So again, you've got somebody who's, there's no way in hell this guy's going to find where I want them to be. Maybe you take them out and you put them in, or you trust that they're going to be able to do their job, so you just have to talk them through. This is where I want you to go. This is what I want you to do. This is how much time you have. It's the GOTWA, right, our 5-point contingency plan. And this works in both ways. So anytime that you have to kind of detach an element from you, you're sending them off to do something, and you're not going to be in direct control of them. You need to give them that GOTWA because you're not going to be able to tell them what you want them to do. That GOTWA is sort of a, everything starts to fall apart. This is what I want you to do. You're going to go here, or I'm going over there. These are the people going with me, or the people going with you. How much time is this going to take? What do you do if, like, there's actions on contact? What do you do if I don't come back? What am I going to do if you don't come back? And then your actions on contact, so your GOTWA. So your security squad is going to break down into those however many teams as part of that leader's recon, and they're going to go out and they're going to in place and they're going to start that observation of the areas around, like you said, your outline. They're going to start that observation of the areas around your objective, start maybe gathering information that maybe they're hearing vehicles, maybe they're smelling something like exhaust fumes from a vehicle, a fire, anything like that. There's any number of things that someone can use to kind of key in to get a better idea of what's going on in an area. So your security element is kind of set in place. I want to actually, before we go to Leaders Recon more, we'll talk through the actual actions on forces. So the first thing we got to do, we set our security squad. They're going to build that bubble around the objective that's going to allow us some measure of confidence as the platoon leader to start moving more people into the objective area. So we know, because you've learned it, after your security is in place, we're going to move our support element in place, right? How do we do that? Here you go. There's the notes over there. So again, we're working backwards on this. So we've already put our security element in. Now we're going to look at setting our support element in. Again, our support element is getting in place because it's going to, you can think C over here. It sets conditions for our assault element. Now the term sets conditions means it allows somebody else to accomplish their job. So again, we're kind of stacking things in our favor. You can see having support going before assault means that if our assault element is moving up to their assault position and they get compromised, somebody breaks a branch or somebody falls down or whatever happens, they get compromised moving to that assault position, that security element's already in place, that assault element can just start their assault, right? So let's say you're at OAL or CST or at a lab or whatever, and you're the assault squad leader, and you're moving up to your assault position, which is that last covered or concealed position before your attack or your raid or whatever starts off, and you get compromised. The enemy sees you moving or whatever it is, and they begin shooting. Our support element's already in place. The guns go hot on the support element. They start suppressing the objective, and the assault element just kicks off the assault. I've had this happen once where we're walking up in the middle of the night, and for whatever reason, somebody kind of found out we were there, and it just turned into kind of a run to get closer to the objective as the support element opens up. So it doesn't have to be this very lockstep, I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this. Our support element is already in place, which means if our assault element is compromised, we can still begin our attack. Again, our support element is going to be separate from us as the platoon leader, so we're ensuring that they have a GOTWA too. Something to keep in mind is like leaders can be taken out of a fight just as effectively as like a Joe can. So even though you might have a platoon sergeant or a weapons squad leader running that support element, that guy can go down too. So we give that GOTWA and we make sure it's disseminated so that those 240 teams, they happen to be the only people kind of still kicking out there on the objective, they know what they're supposed to do as well. So we give them that GOTWA in case they lose contact with us. Things we're talking about for the support element. If you're the support squad leader, that weapons squad leader, that platoon sergeant, whatever you're doing, it should be your weapons squad leader, but the platoon sergeant can run a gun line too. We know that machine guns, you can read it over there, they shoot a lot of rounds in a short period of time, but that doesn't do a lot for us if we don't figure out how we're going to use these rounds effectively. So we talked through that with the weapons squad leader, we rehearsed that. How are we going to actually initiate this ambush or this raid, this attack, whatever? What weapon system are we going to use? There's like a debate that's been going on for decades. Do I initiate an attack with a open bolt or closed bolt weapon? If they say, well, open bolt weapon is going to like slam forward and nothing's going to happen, the round won't go off. So people will say you should always initiate with a claymore if you have it, or with an M4, and then I don't, whatever. Doesn't make any difference to me. So we do need to talk about how we're going to initiate. What's the signal for me to start this assault, and how are we going to sequence this thing in? So we know the support element is trying to gain fire superiority. They're trying to like suppress this objective, which allows our assault element to get onto the objective. And we're probably going to do this through establishing a super, super high rate of fire initially from our support element. That's those 240s, whatever weapon systems you have out there. So we got to talk through that. When we initiate, what are the guns going to do? If we've got two 240s, is gun one just going to pull the trigger, hold it down, and like rake their target area for 10 seconds, shooting cyclic? It's going to allow us to draw a lot of attention to the support position because all of a sudden this machine gun's going off. It's going crazy and dumping like 800 rounds a minute onto the objective. So if we're going cyclic for how many seconds to immediately gain fire superiority, kind of establish that surprise and allow our assault element to begin moving on, how long are they going to shoot cyclic? And the question there is like, do I have spare barrels to switch barrels out? And how many rounds do I have? I've only got 400 rounds. I know I can go cyclic for like 30 seconds probably, but I need to be able to sustain this fight for 5 or 10 minutes. So there's some math there at a higher level as a platoon leader involved. If we start looking at our support plan, how long can my guns shoot at given rates of fire? But for purposes of this, we're just looking at, I need to quickly establish fire superiority. So I'm going to shoot a lot of rounds from our machine guns really fast to draw attention over here because the assault element is off on a flank getting ready to move in. Another thing we need to do is like, if you've got two 240s and maybe there's a bunker sitting out there, both those 240s, if they're left to their own devices, are going to try to like shoot into the bunker, right? Which completely ignores everything else going around in the area. So something we need to consider or concern ourselves with as we're talking about how we do this is like dividing the objective up into different areas. We call that like fire distribution. So we're looking at like gun one has from, this is your right limit, this is your left limit, and gun two's over here. They're tied in, but we're not letting these privates shooting machine guns just decide whatever they want to shoot. Whatever looks good to me right now is what I'm going to shoot because they're both going to try to shoot like into the firing port of the bunker and ignore everything else. So we're looking at our rates of fire. How long are we going to shoot? And how many rounds are we going to shoot in that period of time? How do we transition to different rates of fire? So we're going to start shooting a lot of rounds really fast. And after 10 seconds, we're going to slow down. We're going to go to a rapid rate of fire. We're going to start talking those guns, which the idea of talking guns is you've got, we'll say simply, you've got two 240s. We can maximize our rounds by one 240 shooting for a little bit, and then he stops, and then the other 240 shoots. We're looking at like how long are these bursts going to be in terms of rounds? 6 to 9 rounds, 10 to 12 rounds, and then how much time is there between bursts between the guns? So we say talking guns, we've got gun one shoots, boom, 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 boom. And then they stop, and then gun two, boom, 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 boom. And they go back and forth and back and forth. And that way we have that kind of regular fires going on the objective area. We're not burning through rounds, and we're kind of able to control that. And because we've divided through our kind of fires distribution, we divided this objective area up. Gun one's going to shoot over here. They're going to stop. Gun 2 is going to wait 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever you tell them, and then they're going to shoot their burst, and then back and forth and back and forth. And that's talking guns. And this is something you have to rehearse. So if you're a weapon squad leader or you're a 240 gunner, one of your rehearsals is making sure that people understand how to talk these guns effectively, right? So that we're not just wasting all of our ammunition the first minute because maybe our assault element hasn't closed that gap. They're not on the objective yet, right? So our support element runs out of rounds. Your assault element is kind of hung out to dry at this point. They've got to just continue their assault forward. They've got no supporting fires. So rehearsals for your gun teams and things like that is just simple stuff like talking the guns. And it's just you as the weapon squad leader or you as that 240 gunner just going back and forth. Gun 1, boom, 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 boom. 1, 2, 3. Gun 2, boom, 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 boom. So we practice this type of stuff. So we talk about dividing the objective area up into these sectors. We're looking at, we call them TRPs, target reference points. You may have heard this before. This is like a piece of terrain that machine gunner can identify and know, okay, that's TRP 1. It's that tree stump or that rock pile, the edge of the building, whatever it is. So you're going to tell them, when we start off, I want you shooting at TRP 1. TRP 1 is going to be that pile of rocks. I want you to shoot in and around that pile of rocks. When I tell you to, you're going to shift over to TRP 2. You're probably going to shift away from your assault element. So the reason is, obviously, as your assault element is getting closer and closer to that objective, our fires are going to have to shift away from them to give them that buffer to their front so they can continue to confidently, at that high tempo, audaciously assaulting up to their objective. So we do this by using TRPs. So we don't just say, hey, shift your fire to the left, because left could be 2 feet to the left, it could be 200 feet to the left. So you as that leader are looking at those TRPs and saying, that's TRP 1, that's where you're going to start. When I tell you to shift left to TRP 2, TRP 2 is the tree stump, like over here. Do you see that tree stump? That's TRP 2. So we're saying shift left TRP 2, maybe shift left TRP 3, and we're shifting our fires away from our assault element as our assault element is bounding across. What else? So we've looked at our rates of fire. We've looked at our TRPs for how we distribute fires. We need to talk about, and that's our shifting too for TRPs. When we cease fire or we lift fire, how are we going to do that? So ceasefire, the guns just go cold, right? Guns go silent, we stop shooting. Once we go into a ceasefire, you're kind of holding at that point. Your weapons hold, you're not firing. We can also go into a lift fire, which is like maybe we've got a TRP way off in the distance, far, far over to our left, where we think the enemy might be. We go into a lift fire, it means those 240s can engage targets of opportunity out there. So ceasefire means you don't shoot. You may have to go into a ceasefire based on how the terrain looks, right? Maybe you don't have good knowledge of what's over there. Maybe you've got a security element off on that left side, so you can't shoot over there because you don't know where those rounds are going. Or maybe it's wide open, and now we can look at establishing a lift fire, which is like we're going to stop shooting, but we're going to search out in that area. As the 240s, the weapons squad leader, everybody's searching over there because we think the enemy, we think the enemy might come in from that direction. So we're looking at how do we shift fires away from our assault element? Are we going to cease fire or are we going to lift fire? They both mean stop shooting, but a ceasefire is like don't shoot ever again. And a lift fire is you're not shooting over here, but if something turns up over there and you need to suppress it or engage it, you can do that. So we're looking at how do we actually sequence this stuff? How do we know when to shift from TRP1 to TRP2? There's going to be some sort of signal, right? You, as the assault element, as that assault element leader or that platoon leader on that assault, it's your responsibility to sequence this stuff, but the support element also has to kind of know what's going on. So maybe my signal is I'm calling you over the radio. I'm saying, you know, whatever, platoon sergeant, weapons squad leader, shift fire TRP2. He's going to acknowledge, Roger, shift fire TRP2. He's telling his guns, shift fire TRP2, or shift left TRP2. The machine guns are moving over, shift left TRP2. Once he sees those guns have shifted, he can get that response. Platoon leader, guns shift TRP2, you can continue your assault. You're probably doing this in advance so that you're not like on that assault bounding forward. You're not stopped and like waiting like on a knee behind a bush. Like, are the guns shifted yet? It all has to be kind of fluid, which is why we rehearse that. What is my criteria to shift? What happens if I call on the radio and they don't shift? Can I throw smoke out there? Can I shoot a star cluster? Do I have a whistle? I'm gonna like blow on the whistle twice. That's the signal to shift fire. I'm gonna blow on the whistle 3 times. That's a lift fire, cease fire, whatever it is. So all these things have to be talked about and considered because obviously the concern is like that assault element is moving and all of a sudden they're in like the beaten zone for those 240s and that support element and you're getting shot by your own people. And again, responsibility here is that 240 teams, that weapon squad leader, the local security on that support by fire are trying to identify where that assault element is, and they're preemptively shifting in case they're like, okay, they're getting kind of close and no one said shift fire. It is my individual responsibility now to alert everybody, hey, the assault element's moving over. We need to shift left to TRP2. And you can start making those calls yourself. You know, so don't let these guys wander into your line of fire because you're afraid to identify the fact that the assault element's getting close because you can see them, right? So it's a shared responsibility. It's also an individual soldier task, kind of know what's going on. And then the last thing we need to talk about is support element also has to allow the assault element to get back off the objective. How are we going to do this? Well, we're going to rehearse that. We're going to talk through it. Maybe we've got our red, white, and blue for like how we're sequencing people back off, but there has to be some plan in place for my support element to allow the assault element to come back off the objective. Okay, so we've talked about establishing security. We talked about establishing support. Now we'll look at like our assault element. You can see all my notes over there still, maybe.
Hey, Reem.
Yes.
I just want to bring something real fast up. Supply fire. Some people use TRPs. And you guys know I was calling them PDFs. So the primary direction fire for the gun 1, and then PDF 2 is areas that you're shooting at, and that's your TRP 2. But a PDF is the same thing. I just don't want to get no one confused on that.
Okay. Okay, so we've got our security in place. Our support element has moved up. We've got our guns laid in. They're on our tripods because we know that 240s turn into like lasers when they're on a tripod. Those rounds are going to go exactly where you put them. So now we've got to move our assault element in. Again, assault element's going in last because that security establishes that outline and that bubble that allows us to start moving more people in with some measure of confidence. Moving our support element in because if our assault element is compromised as they're occupying that assault position, we can still regain or maintain the initiative and start that assault. So now we're moving our assault element in. So our assault position, you can see right here, I think it's the last cover to conceal position prior to the assault. This is the last spot you're going to occupy. It might be like behind some vegetation or in a depression or a little piece of low ground or a draw or whatever. Your assault element is going to kind of get spread out and they're going to move out of that assault position up over the top or out of the wood line or whatever it is and begin their assault forward. We're doing the same sorts of things here. We talked about like those privates with those 240s. Everyone's going to want to be the 240 shooting into the window of the bunker, right? Your assault element, the natural inclination is going to be the same thing here. You're assaulting a bunker. Everybody on that assault element is going to be want to be the guy that gets to like throw the grenade into the bunker and be the hero that like destroys the objective. So we have to prevent that by making sure we're still looking at like establishing lanes, right? So if we're the assault squad leader, we're looking at, I've got my 2 teams. How do I set my teams up? Okay, Alpha team's going to be on my right. Bravo team's going to be on my left. I'm going to put myself in the center so I can control both of these kind of bounds as we move forward. I can control these guys. Because again, what everybody's going to want to do, they're going to funnel in on one very specific thing. If there's a guy out there, everybody's going to want to shoot the dead guy just so they can, oh, I shot the guy, right? But you have a lane as an individual soldier you're responsible for. So everybody's got their area. From whatever, we're just generally speaking at 10 o'clock to a 2 o'clock, this is your lane. You don't go too far to the left. You don't go too far to the right. There's a guy over there. Someone's going to take care of him because they've got a lane too. If the bunker's in your lane, you're going to be responsible for that, and your squad leader will have probably already put people in the right spot. Alpha team, you're going to assault the bunker. So now as I'm in my assault position, I'm getting my alpha team oriented kind of in line with the bunker. They're basically going to run into it. So people aren't moving across or masking fires, right? The idea of like, I'm moving into position with my body where you can't shoot. So we're establishing these good lanes for our teams. The team leaders are then going to establish these good lanes for their soldiers. So big picture to small picture, you as a platoon leader, Maybe you've got 2 assault squads. So now you, the platoon leader, is saying, Assault 1 is going to be on my left, Assault 2 is on my right. Now that Assault 1 squad leader is saying, Alpha team, you're going to be on my left, Bravo team, you're going to be on my right. Now Alpha team leader is saying, Joe number 1, you're on my left, Joe 2 and 3, you're on my right. So everybody's responsible for just people immediately below them in terms of actually controlling what they do. So we look at these same lanes. Someone's going to be responsible for this bunker, whatever, for the destruction of this piece of equipment, whatever it is. That's their job. So they're oriented in that area to kind of do that thing. So we can see down here, we already talked about it. You're looking big picture. You're breaking people down into their sub-elements. That sub-element is breaking their people down into their sub-elements. Again, the best way to do this is to still talk about terrain you can identify. So if we think back to, we're looking in our assault position for our leader's recon. You as that platoon leader, that assault squad leader, are looking at like terrain on the far side of the objective area and saying, okay, like, again, that pile of rocks, that tallest tree out there, I'm going to orient on that. My squad is going to orient on that. And I'm going to put one team to the left of it, one team to the right of it. That way, everybody knows what I'm talking about. I'm not giving them an azimuth and saying, we're going to assault at 190 degrees. Everybody pull out your compass, right? Like, I'm just looking at terrain. We're talking terrain, and everybody can always quickly reorient themselves and say, oh, I'm moving too far to the left. I'm moving too far to the right. I need to stay in my lane. Lastly, we're making sure, as you can see right there, our assault element is aligned with the decisive point. So we talked last week about the concept of a decisive point. The decisive point, again, is like an event or a time or whatever it is that greatly increases the likelihood that we're going to be successful in our mission. So decisive point is probably going to be outlined to you in your op order. Decisive point could be something like getting your assault element into hand grenade position of a bunker. This is decisive because it allows us to destroy the bunker. What this tells you as the assault element leader, assault squad leader, is worst case scenario, stuff starts to fall apart. I need to make sure I can get people into hand grenade range of the bunker. That's decisive because it's going to allow me to destroy the bunker, right? Or your decisive point may be occupation of the assault position. So this is something, if you're the DO, that decisive operation, that decisive point is going to allow you to key in and say, above all else, this is the one thing I need to do. I need to get to this spot, or I need to be here at this time. I need to do this thing. And that's going to focus everything else you do. It's kind of achieving that decisive point, because that decisive point is going to allow us to increase the chance that we're successful. Okay, I've talked a lot for the last 20 minutes. What are you guys' questions about this? I know you've got a lot of kind of class in this previously, so this is just sort of refresher training. So our support goes, or our security goes in. What is security doing again, Clennon?
Security is isolating the objective so they make sure that no one's going in or out of the objective.
Okay, how many security elements do you think you're going to need?
For this one, it doesn't kind of depend on the mission, but for this one, probably one squad setting up on the trail.
I think you're right on the first time, right? So the idea here is like the cop-out of people saying net TC. And what that means is, like, it depends on the situation. Every situation is unique. So the number of security teams you're going to need is going to be based on your analysis of the terrain and the enemy. Back to that green, red, blue. We're looking at the terrain and figuring out high-speed avenues of approach. We're looking at how's the enemy going to use these high-speed avenues of approach. How do I respond to that? So the number of security teams you need is going to depend on each situation individually. And it could also be like you might attack the same type of objective and have to put your security in different spots based on that situation, because every situation is unique. What about the support element? What is the support element doing? Clennon?
The support element is setting up to suppress the enemy on the objective so that the assault element can move through and take care of the objective.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Support element, their only goal in life is to let the assault element get onto the objective. You're going to do this probably through your suppressive fires. So again, we're looking at like getting our support element into a spot. It's going to allow our assault element to get on the objective. And then lastly, because we just kind of talked about it, your assault element is doing whatever the actual mission is. If your mission is to destroy a bunker, destroy a retrans site, conduct a raid on a building, because you're looking for some bad guy who you think is in this building. That assault element is going to be people who are going to go in and they're going to kill or capture this guy. They're going to destroy this equipment. They're going to recover whatever piece of equipment they need off this objective. So your assault element is doing the actual job. Everyone else is setting conditions for your assault element to be successful. Anybody have any questions about this stuff? Mr. Howard, Sergeant Casillas, you have anything to add about this part?
Not this time.
Okay, so like I said, we're kind of working this backwards because I talked about like backwards planning, right? So we started at actions on the objective. Our security element's going to be set in place. Again, we're ensuring that our security element has the equipment they need to do their job. If you're going to need to communicate with them, they need to have radios, right? So you can't send your security element off all by themselves and think that somehow they see like a tank coming down this trail. How are they going to let you know there's a tank rolling up to your objective? Well, they're not if they don't have radios to communicate. You're telling them if like a technical truck, like a pickup truck with a machine gun comes down this trail, destroy it. Do they have the equipment to destroy it? You can't give them a task or a responsibility without making sure they have the equipment. So if you don't have the equipment to do that, if you don't have AT4s, you can't reasonably tell somebody to destroy a vehicle with their M4s or their SAWs. You might be able to, you might not, but it's not a safe bet. So whatever your security element is doing, make sure they have the equipment necessary to do that thing. So we're going to work backwards now from our actions on, because again, we're looking at time management. If I have an hour to plan this thing, I'm going to start at the most important thing, which is my actions on, and I'm going to work backwards. So now we've talked about how actions on is going to go. Now we can talk about our leaders recon, which is the big thing that happens before actions on. So what are we doing for leaders recon? We've already got to all that. You guys know all the actions on for how individual soldiers are doing their stuff with the LOA, how we sequence off, all that sort of stuff. So let's work backwards now. So our actual plan is complete. Now what are we going to do? We're going to work backwards. We're going to talk about from the time we get to our ORP until we actually move up to the objective. And if I'm confusing you, we're just looking at big events, starting at our action on the objective and working backwards, big event to big event to big event. Again, we're doing this because we don't have a lot of time, so we're not going to worry about when we step off, because if we have to choose what to not plan, we probably want to not plan the beginning portion and have a good plan for how we're going to assault this objective. So we've already got a plan for how we're going to assault. I want to put my assault element generally here. I want to put my support element generally here. I want to put my security element generally here. They're going to talk through their individual responsibilities. Now we can move backwards to the next big event, which is occupation of the ORP and our leaders recon. So we'll work backwards to the next big event, the ORP. So we're going to talk about what happens when we occupy the ORP and we get people in our positions. So from the ORP, we need to do our leaders recon, right? Because we've got an idea from the map of what does the terrain look like? Where do I think the enemy is going to be on the terrain? Where do I want to be to respond to that? The leaders recon is going to go out and actually confirm the kind of the idea that we have. This is going to be suitable, or they're going to pinpoint a specific spot. So I can look at the map and say, I want to be on this ridge. The leaders recon is going to go out and find where exactly on this ridge am I going to be. So you have a general idea of where you're going to go. And leaders recon is going to allow you to confirm your plan is actually going to work. So leaders recon, we're moving uncertainty from the plan, which is going to reduce risk, going to allow us to be more confident in what we're doing. We looked at the map. So now we're going to look at like who's going on the leaders recon. If you didn't know doctrinally who goes on the leaders recon, who would you want to take? Brennan?
It's the PL. It's you would take the security squad because you're going to set them. And would you take a team leader or squad leader from every squad?
Yeah, so generally speaking, right, I would want to, if there was no doctrine on this, I would want to take everybody who has to make a decision, right? I want to take somebody who's responsible for each element. So I want to take somebody for the assault. I want to take somebody for support. I want to leave my security, and I'm going to take all the security people. There's no point in bringing them out to come back to bring them out a second time if we can just take them out and put them in place, right? And they're going to be far enough away from the objective but we're not necessarily concerned with them compromising us. We probably don't want to take our support and our assault element up there right away because there's going to be like 30 people in a line behind me in the woods waiting to be told where to go. But I'm going to take key people that have to make decisions about how this is going to go so we can talk through this thing. So, yeah, I'm probably taking maybe my whole security squad because they're just going to stay there. I'm going to take somebody from assault. I've got 2 assault squads. If I take somebody from each assault squad, I've got a support squad going in. I want to take somebody who's in charge of the support squad. Maybe I want to take like somebody to stay behind my surveillance and observation team who's going to keep eyes on the actual objective when I have to leave, right? So if you don't know, make sure you're taking somebody, a decision maker from each element, so they can go out there and you can have a talk with them. You guys can break it down in person. You're actually looking at the objective and saying, okay, there's the bunker over there. So I think I want to put my support here because it's going to be able to suppress the bunker. Who's going to be in charge of support? Maybe your weapon squad leader. Maybe it's a platoon sergeant because you don't have a weapon squad leader right now. Or your weapon squad leader sucks. Right? So your platoon sergeant may have to go out. Doctrinally, it says your platoon sergeant stays at the ORP to run that. Again, like, it's your call. That is the art of leadership, is you have the ability to adjust these things. Again, your platoon sergeant's supposed to stay back. You take the weapon squad leader. Your weapon squad leader's a dud and you don't trust them. Take somebody you do trust to run that thing for you. So I'm taking everybody or somebody from each element so we can have that talk. So we're going to go out. So we're going to leave our ORP. I've got everybody I'm taking, right? So I'm taking my whole security squad because they're just going to stay out there. I'm taking a representative from the weapon squad as the support element so we can have that talk so that as we go in and move these people into their positions, that guy already knows what the support element is going to do. We've already talked about where the 240 is going to be. What are they going to orient on? What is their principal direction of fire? The TRP they're going to orient on? How are we going to shift fire? How are we going to lift fire? That's all stuff we're talking about on the leader's recon so that weapon squad leader can brief their gun teams. We're taking our support or assault element people so that as we get into that assault position, we can say, hey, your left limit is over here. Your right limit is over there. You, assault 2, your left limit is over here. Your right limit is over there. This is what I want you to orient on. Our LOA is going to be somewhere out there in the distance. It's 20 meters into the wood line on the far side, whatever it is. We're having these sorts of talks. And we're going to do this in the same kind of order that we're going to actually occupy these things because it's going to allow you to have some idea of what kind of time this is going to take. So we're going to leave our ORP. We're going to go to that release point on the map. That's when those soldiers are released to their positions, and they're going to come back to when they're done. We'll come back through when they're done. So we'll go to our release point, and now we're going to start sequencing people out. So the first thing we got to do, like we talked about, our security elements are going to break down into their teams or whatever we've got, and they're going to go to their areas. Now, again, there's any number of ways you can do this. You can take each security team because you don't trust them to be able to navigate in the dark or whatever, or you can just tell them, go here. You have 45 minutes to in place. In place means you've got your Claymore put out, your AT-4 is ready to fire, you guys have got good cover and concealment, all those sorts of things. Call me on the radio. We have to look at like what happens if your security element doesn't call you back, because that can happen. Maybe they're in a position where their radio doesn't work or their radio drops fill or whatever it is. We've got to have a plan now as part of our GOTWA, our contingency. What happens if we have a breaking contact? And you may be faced with a tough decision. The question is, what is the rate of movement for a platoon moving through bushes? The rate that you can control your platoon, right? So you're worried that the likelihood of enemy contact is very high. You're probably moving very slow. You think that the likelihood of enemy contact is very low. You can probably pick up your rate of movement, but it all comes back to like being able to control your platoon, control your squad or whatever it is. And by control, again, we're talking about your ability to actually tell them where to go and what to do. So control is hand and arm signals, control is verbal, like I can talk to you, control is me talking over the radio. You have to maintain control of your people. So you're not going to move faster than you can control them. You're not going to move faster than you can reliably respond to contact. So back to the initial question, or the initial point, our security elements are moving in their position. We're going to give them that timeline. You've got X number of minutes to be in place in your position, or established in your position. I'm sorry, established meaning Claymore set up, your AT-4 is prepped, all these sorts of things. And like I was saying, as a platoon leader, you may be faced with that difficult decision where like your one security team is just not responding to you. You haven't heard any gunfire, so unless like a ninja cut their throats, they're still out there doing something, but we don't know what they're doing. Am I going to continue my plan, continue my attack without knowledge of what that security team is going to do? Or am I going to grind everything to a halt and have to walk over there and find them? And there's no right answer to that because it's going to depend again on that situation. If your security team leader is solid and you trust what they're doing, then again, this is all part of leadership stuff, making the right decision based on what you know at that time. So I can't tell you what to do if your security team doesn't respond to you. Obviously, your gut was going to say, what do you do if you come into contact? What do you do if you hear me in contact? What to do if like you just have no idea where I am? You move back to the release point. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that can happen. You could probably consider that. I don't have contact with that security team. Am I going to continue my attack? So security team goes out. Again, you can take them. You can let them go. They're going to in place. Next, we're going to do our leaders recon for our support element. And we're doing this in the same order. So you and that weapon squad leader, and maybe you take additional people. Maybe it's the two of you. Maybe you take an S&O up there with you to provide that little bit of local security. Maybe you leave the S&O back near the release point. This is all on you for how you want to do this. Doctrine says one thing, but again, you're empowered as a leader to make decisions based on that situation. You're not bound to doctrine. Doctrine is just a way to do things. So we're going to move up to that support position. We're going to recon the support position. Again, we're talking like, what is the principal direction of fire or the TRP that I'm going to initiate my fires on? Where are my guns physically going to be? Are they going to be like 10 feet from each other? Am I going to put one gun here, another gun 30 meters to the left? Maybe the terrain requires you to do that because there's like a big rock pile in the middle and we don't want both our 240 sitting on top of each other. So now we have to physically move them apart. If I do that, how do I control those guns? And so we're talking all that type of stuff. So we're crawling up there, you and the weapon squad leader, you're saying, okay, corner of this building is TRP1. That's your principal direction of fire. Your guns are initially going to orient on that. Your principal direction of fire is TRP2, and then we're going to shift. So you're going to shift TRP1 to TRP2. You're going to shift TRP2 to TRP3. When we initiate, I want your guns to go cyclic for the first 5 seconds. So you're just going to pull the trigger down and hold it, and you're just going to burn off a bunch of rounds really quickly. And then I want us to go to a rapid rate of fire. So I'm going to shoot 6 to 9 rounds per burst, 2 to 3 seconds between bursts, and we're going to talk guns. So we go cyclic, gun 1. You're going to then transition to rapid. You're going to go boom, 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 boom. 2 to 3 seconds, gun 2, you pick up. Boom, 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 boom. We're going to go like that. We're going to go rapid for 20 seconds. Then we're going to go sustained rate of fire, 6 to 9 rounds or 5 to 7 round bursts, 4 to 5 seconds between. That sustained rate of fire is going to allow these guns to continue to talk. As our assault element gets close, we're going to transition back to a rapid rate of fire. We're going to pick up the fire near the end to allow our assault element to close that last distance on the objective. This is all stuff you can talk about. The big stuff, though, is making sure we divide that sector up. So we've got good coverage of our guns. We have plans for how we're going to shift fires away from our assault element so we're not shooting our own people. You may want to actually mark those gun positions, right? If your weapon squad leader is a potato who has no clue what's going on, you might go out there with some engineer tape or whatever, and you're actually going to mark the spot and say, gun 1 is going to be right here by this tree. Gun 2 is going to be right here by these rocks. Again, that's going to allow you to visualize and know what's going on. We're going to come back from our support position. Now we're going to take our assault people. We're going to go to the assault position. Again, we've looked on the map. We've identified a spot we think is going to be good. And actually go out and find that thing now. Is the assault position big enough to hold my assault element? If I've got 2 squads on assault 1 and assault 2, excuse me, maybe I need to make 2 kind of close by assault positions because I can't lump everybody into one spot. Again, characteristic of the offense, concentration. Do I concentrate everybody right here, or do I disperse them across an area? And the choice you make, again, is going to be like NetTC. It's going to depend on, what is your mission? What does the terrain look like? How's the enemy equipped? What do I expect them to do in terms of their most likely course of action? All these sorts of things. So we're going to go out. We're going to recon our assault position. We're doing the same type of stuff. We're looking at building lanes for our assault elements. And then our assault element leaders are going to look at building lanes for their subordinate teams and their subordinate teams and so on and so forth. So we're making sure we're kind of doing some quick math and saying, if I need to cover like a 100-meter front, left to right, to clear through this objective because maybe it's 3 or 4 buildings, right? Or 2 or 3 bunkers in sequence, whatever it is. and how wide it is. It's 100-meter front. Assault 1's probably got about 50 meters. So how far do they need to spread their people? How much room are they going to need? Assault 2's got X amount of meters. How much room are they going to need? And that allows us to build these lanes and kind of picture in our head what this looks like. And your LOA is going to be 20 meters into the wood line, 40 meters in the wood line, whatever it is. We're talking through all this stuff. Your assault leaders are getting a good idea of what it looks like. Because when we leave here and go back to the ORP, we're going to brief this quickly, and then we're just going to move in and start doing the thing. So our security set, we did our recon of our support position, we did our recon of our assault positions. We're going to move back to the ORP, but before we do that, we want to make sure we have somebody still watching the objective, right? Our support elements are out here looking out. They've established that kind of outline of that boundary, the borders of our objective. And they're primarily making sure that people aren't moving into the objective. We also, though, probably want to leave somebody that can observe the objective area itself to make sure that, like, and this has happened before, when I've been out for, you can, like, maybe see somebody doing a leader's recon, and you identify, like, okay, that's probably where their assault position is going to be. And then you move people over there to kind of hit them as they're moving to their position, right? So we're going to leave somebody behind who's going to watch the objective area and make sure stuff doesn't change while we're gone. Maybe, like, you think that these buildings have 3 people in them, and you leave that, our surveillance and observation team, the SNO, usually 2 people. At SNO, you all leave, the SNO's like, oh man, like 10 people, 20 people just walked out of this building. Like, there's a lot more people here than we thought. We refer back to, like, the Sante raid at secondary school. They thought had like 10 people in it, ended up having like up to 200 like Chinese military instructors in this building. They thought there was a handful of people in there. The SNO is going to allow you to kind of get an idea if stuff changes that they can identify. They're able to report that back to you. The situation has changed out here. And then you have to decide, am I still going to execute my attack, or am I going to have to kind of deviate from my plan? So as we go back to ORP, security is in place. We reconned our support position. We reconned our assault position. Now we're going to leave that surveillance and observation team, that SNO, in a spot where they can see the objective. The most common way to do this is you're going to have like one soldier looking in the direction of the objective. You're going to have another soldier looking in the direction of the release point where people are going to come from. That allows us to have kind of good understanding for that SNO of what's going on. And they're kind of, you know, right next to each other, but one's looking up, one's looking down. You're good, Anderson. And they're kind of continuing to, like I said, watch that objective area to make sure that nothing changes while you as the patrol leader, platoon leader are gone. So now we're going to go back to the ORP, probably call whoever's in charge of that ORP, that platoon sergeant, or whoever you left back as overall in charge. Call them and tell them, hey, leader's recon is complete. Get everybody ready to move so that as you get back, people have already stripped off all the equipment they're not going to need. Their rucks have already been organized. People need to have special equipment, like you've got AT4s that are coming off rucks or whatever it is and going to the right people. People are testing all their equipment, making sure everything is good. That's all done. We can do that parallel, right? So, like, we probably don't want to do that ahead of time because maybe you get there and you're like, this position is not going to work at all. Like, it's not suitable. We got to move somewhere else entirely different. So you don't want to have, like, your ORP ready to go on this attack or this assault, and then you to call them or come back and say, this isn't going to work at all. We got to leave, because now you're losing time to undo what you already did. So as we're coming back off our leader's recon, we can call that platoon sergeant, say, hey, leader's recon is complete. Get the platoon ready to move. So again, that platoon sergeant, whoever's in charge of the ORP, is going to start making sure, hey, we're getting ready to move. PL's on his way back. He's going to be back in 10, 15 minutes. So whatever it is, you got to go pee, go take a piss, make sure that everyone's got the right ammo in the right spots. Everybody understands what they're doing. PL's going to come back with the assault squad leaders, the support squad leaders. Our SNO's staying out there, security staying out there, and they're going to quickly brief. So the PL can come back with the platoon sergeant. They can have a talk. The squad leaders can go to their respective elements, the support squad, and say, you know, hey, gun 2, this is what we're doing. You're going to be on my left side. I'm going to tell you where to go. We're going to initiate like this. Gun 1, you're going to be on my right. We're going to initiate like this. I'm going to point the TRPs or your principal direction of fire out to you. Just be aware that this is how it's going to go. We're going to move up. We're going to occupy first. Once we're established in our positions, gun 1, you're going to go on bipod. Well, gun 2 goes to tripod. Once gun 2 is on tripod, gun 1 goes to tripod. And that allows us to always have one gun at least functional. Once our support's in place, assault's going to move on. You, as the assault squad leader, are going to your team leaders, just 2 of them, and you're briefing the team leaders what's going on. Once support's in place, we're going to move up. Assault 1's going to go ahead of us. We're Assault 2. Once Assault 1 is in their place, we're going to move up and we're going to occupy our assault position. Alpha team leader, whoever, I want you on my left. Bravo team leader, I want you on my right. When you're in the assault position, I'm going to identify your lanes. I'm going to tell you where the left limit is. I'm going to tell you where the right limit is. So we take these couple minutes back in the ORP. People are going to disseminate the information. You're going to make sure that their one level down knows what's going on. And then that team leader can go to their soldiers and say, you know, Joe number 1, Joe number 2, Joe number 3, we're on assault 2. We're going to be on the far right of everybody. This is what we're doing. So everyone's allowing little time to disseminate information. Sometimes, and you will discover this at OAL or whatever, you may not have time for everybody to disseminate everything. So maybe we get back and we've just got to go because our timeline is tight. So all our assault leaders can say is they tell their team leaders, hey, we're assault 1. Follow me out to the assault position. When we get there, I'm going to kind of brief you quick on what's going on, and we're going to kick this thing on. Okay? We talked a lot. Again, I've talked for about an hour now. Didn't want these things to be like this, but it's very difficult with WebEx. So we know what happens at this point, right? We've talked about our actions on. We've talked about our leaders recon because, again, we're doing this backwards planning. Starting the most important thing and working our way back. Prior to this, from our ORP to our leaders recon to our actions on, step before our ORP is like the route out to the ORP. So now in our planning process, we could talk through like what routes are we going to take, what's the order of march, what formation are we going to use, all these sorts of things. But again, if something has to give between you having a really good route plan to where you're going or you having a really good plan for actions on the objective, obviously the mission is to do like whatever the actions on are. So we can kind of wing a route plan if you have to. Not the best thing to do, but again, in time constrained environment, which you will have, I'll tell you right now, you will have at OAL, you will have at CST, and oftentimes in real life, you're gonna be operating under time constraints. Start with the most important thing. Don't try to sequence everything start to finish. You probably need to go to the finish line and work your way back. Mr. Howard Sarkis, do you have anything to add? I know I've been talking a lot, and I was hoping you guys would jump in. But anything to add to this?
I thought you had it. You're doing pretty good.
Yeah, what's there to add? You got it all covered.
I'm sorry. Okay, so like I said, we're approaching 11 o'clock. So key takeaways from this, as far as like just attacks in general, those characteristics of the offense, right? Audacity is a bold plan, simply executed. Concentration, when do we put all our people into an assault position or a support position? When do we spread them out? And that's a decision you as a leader have to make. I concentrate, or like I mass my people in one area, I'm going to be able to overwhelm whatever I run into, but I run the risk of like indirect fires and machine gun fires knocking out a whole bunch of people at once. So it's a question of when do I spread people out? When do I pull them in? You're going to have to kind of feel that out based on the situation. We've got surprise, which again ties in the idea of initiative. An initiative is you being able to dictate when you fight and where you fight. Surprise is going to allow you to achieve this. And then lastly, tempo. On the offense, again, we're trying to set a tempo or a pace of the fight that the enemy can't match. They can't respond to it, right? So like we're going so quickly that enemy platoon leader, whoever it is, enemy squad leader, is like stuff is happening so fast around them that they don't have the time to organize what's going on and put up like a good response. So we're setting a tempo that they can't match. We do this like with our machine gun fires. 240s are blowing rounds on the objective as the assault element is rapidly bounding forward onto that objective. That's our tempo. We're doing this so quickly that we overwhelm them. I know Mr. Howard said at the beginning, we're looking at like our most likely course of action. You're going to win that fight. Fights are won oftentimes by who establishes a higher tempo, who is more aggressive, who is more violent. What you'll discover with like your battle drills, the movement to contacts you're going to do, you will win a movement to contact by deploying more rapidly than the enemy and maneuvering on them before they can maneuver on you. Everybody in the world has the same sort of battle drills, right? Like the doctrine that we have in the Army of saying, okay, we're going to come online and we're going to shoot, and then we're going to try to flank. That's not something that like America is not the only people that does that. Everybody in the world does that. So the deciding factor, two equal platoons bump into each other. The platoon that deploys faster and fights more aggressively is going to win that fight. because they're executing these characteristics. The audacious, a bold plan simply executed. I'm going to shoot a lot of rounds right at their face, and I'm going to send people around on the side to overwhelm them. I'm going to concentrate fires or my effects onto this area. I'm going to surprise them by sending a flank around, and I'm going to do it at such a pace that they can't keep up. My tempo is going to be more rapid than that. So you remember nothing else about offensive operations. Understand that, like in a fair fight, the side that deploys more aggressively, more rapidly, establishes a higher tempo, executes with more audacity, will win, all things equal, because they're setting a pace that the other side can't respond to, which is why we do these things with an extreme level of violence. We do them extremely fast, and we can only achieve that through like rehearsals, good planning, everybody understanding what they're doing. Okay, I've again talked for about an hour now. If anybody has anything to add, any questions, anything like that, please feel free to ask. Sorry, Steve.
Hey, Bay, if you guys don't, I think Submarine covered attack pretty well and shit. Like fucking, just remember, key thing, all attacks, raids, and ambushes have the fundamentals baseline to all. And it doesn't matter what it is. You're always going to have security. You're always going to have an assault, and you're always going to have support by fire. And you got an ORP. You don't even have to have an ORP, but you definitely have to have those three bases: a security element, a support, and a fucking assault. And you always got to do a leader's recon, even if it's hasty, and be prepared to do a hasty plan out there. So, I think, hey, Bay,
Roger.
you on there? Hey, are you tracking this portion right here? I'm getting off topic now from class to this right here. Can you guys see this?
Just see sharing content.